Well, hello, everybody. This is Christian Buckley, another episode of MVP Buzz Chat, and this is from the new pad, my new office here. So, Laura, you're the first one with the new space that's not yet quite built out. But
Yay.
Laura Rogers, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Laura Rogers. I'm Microsoft MVP, and I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and I love SharePoint and PowerApps. Is that all?
Just those things?
Yeah, that's it.
I like to throw in there, I also love my wife and my children and extended family members, but that's me. You know?
Oh, yeah, well, I love my husband and my 3 daughters, and I taught my husband PowerApps.
And we were talking about, so we actually, Laura just did a webinar for my user group here in Utah on PowerApps, and we're talking briefly about, so how long have you been running or helping run the user group in your area?
Oh, like, I don't know, 10 years or something in Birmingham. Yeah,
So
we've kind of gone from different venue to venue and gone through the amount of people that come to the meetings, fluxes, and we've had a lot of change. And yeah, we still have a core group of people that are pretty reliable that show up, like 5 or 6 people.
Well,
it's not that big of a group. We're not a big technical community here.
But it's interesting though. It's like, so we have some of the same issues, and there's always a kind of a conversation. Part of the preamble, the start on these things, we talk about the community aspect of that. And I mean, I was a little bit spoiled there in the Seattle area, of course, and I was on the board there for the Puget Sound SharePoint user group for a number of years, and we would get sometimes as low as 30, 35, as many as 100, showing up to each month to those topics. But of course, then we could also pull in product team people and senior execs at Microsoft, and which tend to bring in some bigger crowds. But we have the same issue here in Utah, that there's a core group. There's 12 to 15 people that are there every month for year in, year out. And then depending on the speaker and the topic, it fluctuates. But we're thinking about rebranding. Are you guys still SharePoint user group?
Well, no, I changed the name of it on the website to SharePoint and Office 365 user group. I didn't make a big
That's what we are as well. Yeah.
I guess we could do a new logo or something, but I don't know.
Well, and the other thing too is that we're getting ready in February 9th, I think, whatever the Saturday is. It's this next year will be our 8th annual SharePoint Saturday, Utah.
Oh.
And how long have you guys been doing it? A little bit longer than us?
Well, we've never done a SharePoint Saturday, but yeah.
Wait, hasn't there been a SharePoint Saturday in Birmingham?
Huh?
Hasn't there been one in your area?
There was one like 8 years ago, but someone that we didn't know
Okay.
put it on, and it wasn't even somebody in the user group. It was just some random.
So what is your local?
Weird.
What's your closest SharePoint Saturday then?
Atlanta. So I
Okay.
usually go to that one every year. They didn't have one this year, but that's the one I typically go to every time.
Okay.
We usually have like 500 people at that one. It's pretty big.
So and those are I think surging again. We're seeing a lot more interest in those, and one of the reasons
more people using SharePoint and Office 365. Yeah.
And honestly, we can talk theory about why some of that's happening, and it's the last 2-3 years with the whole SharePoint's cool again, but it's interesting. There was a comment that I made to a question during your webinar to one of the participants, was talking about how we were talking about the lifespan of InfoPath, and about how Microsoft is refocusing their positioning and their innovation around the core strengths of SharePoint around intranet and enterprise collaboration, versus trying to do everything for external websites and kind of every possible scenario. And that has really helped them to kind of focus in. And so really excited about some things. So what's exciting? What are you most passionate about right now with all the recent announcements and what's coming up?
Right now, mostly PowerApps and Flow. I'm immersed in PowerApps pretty much all day, every day. And I'm very excited about all the new modern intranet, the new innovations in that. people are, I think, especially with some of the stuff coming up at Ignite, that announced at Ignite, people are going to really move away from those classic publishing sites and have a reason to move away from the classic publishing sites and have things that they thought were missing in the modern. There more and more of those things are being added to modern. So it's because you get in when you work with customers and consultant, you kind of get in these little conversations with customers where you're trying to talk them into using modern, and they just want to hold on to their old pages and their old everything. And it's like kind of like an argument, like, no, really, like, just please.
Well, that was one of the questions too. It's like, and I had shared out, the end of support in summer of 2021 of InfoPath, and extended support ends in 2026. And because people ask that question, it's like, well, can I not still use it? Like, well, yes, you can, but like you answered but you shouldn't be building anything new in that old technology. You should have them side by side for now, but anything new, create in the new technology.
And you need to like hurry up and get on it, because I mean, one of my customers that it's a government, and they have thousands of InfoPath forms, thousands, and they're just in denial that I'm like, it's going away. You realize that, right? Yeah. Okay.
but it's well, yeah.
No one wants to take that on because you'd have to recreate them all.
Well, so what's interesting is when, so going back, if those that remember Jared Spataro, and he owned SharePoint at Microsoft for a couple of years there, and he's now in Office and has like a broader Office and Microsoft role there. But he was sharing some of like the learnings that he went through in the time he was in that role about how migration, getting people to move from versions. And he said that doing a forced migration, like, hey, there's something new and let's do it all now, was much harder than setting a policy and saying any new sites now must be in the new environment, on the new technology, and let it be this gradual, this more organic move over to the new technology.
That does seem to be what more people do. We had a customer back when SharePoint 2013 came out that was moving from SharePoint 2003 to 2013, and they wanted us to do branding on 2013 to make it look like 2003.
Because it was far superior branding back then. I know.
Confusing any of the end users, and everything would be exactly the same.
I'm going to design all of the images, all the buttons, everything using Corel Draw. And have those gradients, And
as a consultant, sometimes you just have to say no. Every now and then, the customer's not always right.
Yeah, it's no. Look, I understand that there is, there are scenarios, and we see this. Why there are still organizations. I don't know about 2001 anymore. I ask this question when I go to events, like, what versions are you running?
Nobody's on portal server.
I know. No, but only like 2-3 years ago, there were still people saying, yes, we've got something. I'm like, what are you doing? What is that? But there is still a little bit of 2003, not a lot. There's still some 2007, certainly a ton of 2010 is still that's out there. I always like asking that question though, and people are kind of frightened to raise their hand and admit that they're using an older version. And I always like to
a lot of them do what you said, and they've migrated, they've got a new farm, but like half their stuff's on the old one, half stuff's the new one, and no one's like yanked the other one away from them yet.
Right.
So they still just have they're kind of fizzling out just everywhere.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see that with InfoPath. I don't know, as it gets closer, there will be companies that'll have that freak out moment and realize.
And they'll just call me, and
That's right. That's when it's kind of like an Uber or Lyft, when the high demand where the rates all go up accordingly. So
InfoPath consulting rate. Yeah.
I learned that lesson in the early 90s. I was working for EDS, if you remember, a consulting company, and they wanted to make me a COBOL programmer and switch careers.
6 figures.
And I said no, thank you. This was 94, 95, 94. And part of the issue was that, already it was, outdated, these new technologies that are out there. But we worked in healthcare, And a lot of the projects were in healthcare and finance, and all those systems, they were all freaking out because of Y2K. Because as we know, Y2K, end of the world. But they needed these COBOL programmers. And I just said, like, no way. Then I had friends that went and pursued that track. And a couple of years later, I saw what they were making, their hourly. And I regretted not becoming a COBOL. It'll be like that with InfoPath. You'll be crushing it, Laura, crushing it.
No, whoever invents software that will migrate you from InfoPath to PowerApps, they're the ones that'll be crushing it.
That's true. Is anybody working on that you're aware of?
I don't know. It doesn't exist. It seems, from what I know about just like the underlying structure of everything, it seems like almost impossible. Like, because they're two completely different. It's like apples and oranges.
Well, that's what you do. What you have is a service where you actually have just a fleet of, just this massive organization that are going in there and doing that. It's like, it's a very slow process to move it, but it's all actually manual. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of cool things that are happening. I know that some of the other questions that came up, a lot of questions around the permissions aspect where people are still thinking about external users and guest user access with PowerApps. And I know that there's a lot of asks out there. Like, what do you have? Like, what are your requests to Microsoft, things that are still lacking within the technology? Not to put you on the spot, but I'd like to put you on the spot.
Well, the external users is like, when someone asked me in the session, why, is PowerApps ready? I said, yeah, it is totally ready. You can do everything in PowerApps except external users. So there was a time like a year and a half ago where I couldn't make the move to PowerApps. I couldn't tell my customers to, because there was still so much missing, and that you could do in InfoPath and with other third-party products, but you couldn't do in PowerApps yet. There was like big, obvious, important things, but now they've tackled all those, and it's now the only thing I can think of is the external users, because you can do anything in PowerApps. It's so much fun.
Well, I know that, we had these conversations years ago with just external sites and the problems with, people would try and go and create like a partner portal using SharePoint, and they would have problems. They'd have to essentially, have this other separate instance of Active Directory and stand up and run this entire environment to be able to do this secure.
Now it's so easy, right?
It is, well, so much easier, but there's still, like, you would need to still with PowerApps in those scenarios, you still have to give them access and pay for the license for those users, but it's much easier. I have that in mind.
Well, a lot of people are using Teams now for that too, now that you can have external users in Teams, and that's a lot smoother, and you can do a lot of other stuff besides fill out forms. So, but yeah.
Right. And there's Microsoft Forms as well. That's another option if you do need to something.
One way form, simple form submission. Yeah.
Yeah. But anything else that is on the horizons that you're excited about? That's I know we can't talk about what things are being announced next week.
The flow is just changing and updating so fast, I can hardly keep up. I'm in the middle of creating a flow class. People have been asking me for that for months and months, and it's like a moving target. It's ridiculous. So that's one thing that I'm looking for. That's one of the things with Office 365 is, like, we're so used to this versioning and getting the next version and learning that, and then getting
training up on
that's ingrained in us. Right. So this whole concept, like, I can't help it, but in the back of my head, I think, well, once this version is finished, once they stop changing stuff, but they're not.
They never stop.
I had to explain it to a customer the other day. Like, you just have to change your mindset and realize it's never going to stop. It's not going to stop changing. You just have to change your brain to just understand that every time you go in there could be new stuff and different stuff and new features. But it's mostly improvements. It's like, oh, you couldn't do, this was a limitation last week, and now all of a sudden, look what they have and look what they fixed. And so I'm looking forward to flow and basically just personally getting my head around it more and all the intricacies of it, and then teaching a class on it and getting a handle on the rate of change. So that's what I do as teaching training classes. I have to kind of get a handle on what's pretty static in there and what's changing fast, and like adjust kind of how I teach it to
it's funny. So
basics,
But there's just a truth that is even more true now than when I used to, when I consulted with companies back in the early 2000s. And I would say that an organization that is good at change management is going to be successful in just about everything that they go and do, because they're able to adapt to kind of pull in, hey, here's what's new. This is what it is. Here's the impact. Here's what we're going to do, strategy, and then go and do something with that. And organizations need to get much better at that rapid rate of change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just, it's going to happen. And I mean, think about it, like every day, not just in Office 365, but just like on your phone. And any day, an app, like the icon could change colors. They could rearrange some stuff in there, and you just, oh, okay, yeah, now this is here. And you just move on. So it's everywhere we look. It's not just you don't blame Microsoft. It's not just Microsoft.
Right. You're right. It just, it's the speed of the internet now. And that's why, I think it was a lot of questions over this last week with a lot of the MVP discussions around what's going to be some of the announcements next week. And, and I think even MVPs and these other experts out there are also fretting about how difficult it is sometimes just to keep up with what's happening. And that's not going to slow down. It's every year is now the biggest year in SharePoint announcements. Like we're hearing that again. I kind of like rolled my eyes a little bit. It's like, no, there's cool stuff that's coming out. I'm excited, but it's like, again, with the biggest year.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Keeps it exciting. Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, there's it is an exciting time to be involved with this the technology across the board. I mean, SharePoint, OneDrive, I mean, PowerApps and Flow, there's tons of interest around that for just about everything. Like I did an interview with the Stream product team a week and a half ago, and what's happening with video and stuff with Yammer that's coming out. Just there's a lot that's happening. So fun times. We need to all pay attention. So
we just rewrote our whole content types module in our Power User class.
Yeah, that's like an ongoing battle just right there with all that. And that's still like, we're talking about content. Like, so Laura and I, we met at the SharePoint conference 2009. So we're coming up on a decade here. I mean, those were some of the topics, not quite in 2009, but for most of the time we've known each other, that's just continued to be a hot topic.
Yeah, and it's stagnated there for a while, but now that content types is one of those things that people need a lot of the functionality pretty often, but to have to get your head around content types and practically get a PhD in SharePoint just to be able to go like turn on them, be able to modify content types in a list and then create a content type and add it to the list and then that's a lot of work just to be able to say, I want to have a couple of new templates in my library. So the fact that they embraced that concept and fixed it and made it easier, and that's one of those things that was pretty complicated for a lot of years. And now, your mom could probably figure it out, right?
Unless you're in a hybrid environment, then it gets, complicated all over again. But yeah. Anyway. Well, Laura, hey, thanks a lot for your time for the webinar earlier, as well as this chat, and have fun in Florida next week. Enjoy.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be online monitoring, and if you weren't able to attend, not able to go out to Orlando, go to Ignite this next week. Just remember, all the sessions are going to be live streamed, and so anything that you hear about, you receive slides, or you hear us chatting about all next week. These sessions, you're going to be able to find the content within 24 hours, but all those sessions are going to be live streamed because it's sold.
I've got 3 sessions. Yay.
Yeah. And so how can people get in touch with you?
We can follow me on Twitter, Wonderlara, and you can go to my blog, wonderlara.com, and go to iwmentor.com. And one of the fun things you might want to try out is my beginner PowerApps email course, which is 5 days. You get 5 emails and to teach you basics, and you can actually move up to the power user level after you're done with the beginner email course. It's fun. I have a lot of different subscriptions and ways to go through my classes. I have live and I have pre-recorded.
Very cool. Yeah. I'll provide links to all that stuff. So, yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Laura.
All right. Thanks.
Talk to you later.